Synapsids, synonymous with theropsids, are a group of animals that includes mammals and every animal more closely related to mammals than to other living amniotes. They are easily separated from other amniotes by having a temporal fenestra, an opening low in the skull roof behind each eye, leaving a bony arch beneath each. This accounts for the name. Primitive synapsids are usually called pelycosaurs or pelycosaur-grade synapsids, more advanced mammal-like ones, therapsids. The non-mammalian members are described as mammal-like reptiles in classical systematics. They can also be called stem mammals or proto-mammals. Synapsids evolved from basal amniotes and are one of the two major groups of the later amniotes. The other is the theropsids, a group that includes modern reptiles and birds. The distinctive temporal fenestra developed in the ancestral synapsid about 312 million years ago, during the late Carboniferous period. Synapsids were the largest terrestrial vertebrates in the Permian period, 299 to 251 million years ago, although some of the larger parasaurs at the end of Permian could match them in size. As with other groups then extant, the numbers and variety were severely reduced by the Permian-Triassic extinction. By the time of the extinction at the end of Permian, all the older forms of synapsids were already gone, having been replaced by the more advanced therapsids, though the dicynodonts and eutheriodontia, the latter consisting of Eutherocephalia and Epicynodontia, continued into the Triassic period as the only known surviving therapsids. Archosaurs became the largest and most numerous land vertebrates in the course of this period. The cynodont group Probaenognathae, which includes Mammaliaformes, were the only synapsids who outlasted the Triassic. After the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event, the synapsids again became the largest land animals. Linnean and cladistic classifications. Synapsids as a reptilian subclass. Synapsids were originally defined at the turn of the 20th century as one of the four main subclasses of reptiles, on the basis of the distinctive temporal openings. These openings in the cheekbones allowed the attachment of larger jaw muscles, hence a more efficient bite. Synapsids were considered to be the reptilian lineage that led to mammals. They gradually evolved increasingly mammalian features, hence the name mammal-like reptiles, which became a broad, traditional description for all non-mammalian synapsids. The mammal-like reptiles. The traditional classification of synapsids as reptiles is continued by some paleontologists. In the 1990s, this approach was complemented by a cladistic one, according to which the only valid groups are those that include common ancestors and all of their descendants. These are known as monophyletic groups, or clades. Phylogenetically, synapsids are the entire synapsid, mammal branch of the tree of life, though in practice the term is most often used when referring to the reptile-grade synapsids. The term mammal-like reptiles represents a paraphyletic grade, but is commonly used both colloquially and in the technical literature to refer to all non-mammalian synapsids. The actual monophyly of Synapsida is not in doubt, however, and the expressions Synapsida contains the mammals and synapsids gave rise to the mammals both express the same phylogenetic hypothesis. Primitive and advanced synapsids. The synapsids are traditionally divided into a primitive group and an advanced group, known respectively as pelycosaurs and therapsids. Pelycosaurs make up the 6 most primitive families of synapsids. They were all rather lizard-like, with sprawling gait and possibly horny scutes. The therapsids contain the more advanced synapsids, having a more erect pose and possibly hair, at least in some forms. In traditional taxonomy, the synapsid encompasses 2 distinct grades successively closer to mammals. The low-slung pelycosaurs have given rise to the more erect therapsids, who in the turn have given rise to the mammals. In traditional vertebrate classification, the Pelycosauria and Therapsids were both considered orders of the subclass Synapsids. In phylogenetic nomenclature, the terms are used somewhat differently, as the daughter clades are included. Most papers published during the 21st century have treated Pelycosauria as an informal grouping of primitive members. Therapsids has remained in use as a clade containing both the traditional therapsid families and mammals. However, in practical usage, the terms are used almost exclusively when referring to the more basal members that lie outside of mammalia families. Characteristics: temporal openings. Synapsids evolved a temporal fenestra behind each eye or bit on the lateral surface of the skull. It may have provided new attachment sites for jaw muscles. A similar development took place in the diapsids, which evolved two rather than one opening behind each eye. Originally, the openings in the skull left the inner cranium covered only by the jaw muscles, but in higher therapsids and mammals, the sphenoid bone has expanded to close the opening. This has left the lower margin of the opening as an arch extending from the lower edges of the brain case. Teeth. Synapsids are characterized by having differentiated teeth. These include the canines, molars, and incisors. The trend towards differentiation is found in some labyrinthodonts and earlier napsid reptilians in the form of enlargement of the first teeth on the maxilla, forming a form of proto-canines. This trait was subsequently lost in the sauropsid line, but developed further in the synapsids. Early synapsids could have 2 or even 3 enlarged canines, but in the therapsids, the pattern had settled to 1 canine in each upper jaw half. The lower canines developed later. Jaw. The jaw transition is a good classification tool, as most other fossilized features that make a chronological progression from a reptile-like to a mammalian condition follow the progression of the jaw transition. The mandible, or lower jaw, consists of a single, tooth-bearing bone in mammals, whereas the lower jaw of modern and prehistoric reptiles consists of a conglomeration of smaller bones. As they evolved in synapsids, these jaw bones were reduced in size and either lost or, in the case of the articular, gradually moved into the ear, forming one of the middle ear bones, while modern mammals possess the malleus, incus and stapes. Basal synapsids possess only a stapes. The malleus is derived from the articular, while the incus is derived from the quadrate. Mammalian jaw structures are also set apart by the dentary squamosal jaw joint. In this form of jaw joint, the dentary forms a connection with a depression in the squamosal known as the glenoid cavity. In contrast, all other jawed vertebrates, including reptiles and non-mammalian synapsids, possess a jaw joint in which one of the smaller bones of the lower jaw, the articular, makes a connection with a bone of the cranium called the quadrate bone to form the articular quadrate jaw joint. In forms transitional to mammals, the jaw joint is composed of a large lower jaw bone that does not connect to the squamosal, but connects to the quadrate with a receding articular bone. Palate. Over time, as synapsids became more mammalian and less reptilian, they began to develop a secondary palate, separating the mouth and nasal cavity. In early synapsids, a secondary palate began to form on the sides of the maxilla, still leaving the mouth and nostril connected. Eventually, the two sides of the palate began to curve together, forming a U-shape instead of a C-shape. The palate also began to extend back toward the throat, securing the entire mouth and creating a full palatine bone. The maxilla is also closed completely. In fossils of one of the first eutheriodons, the beginnings of a palate are clearly visible. The later Thrinaxodon has a full and completely closed palate, forming a clear progression. Skin and fur in addition to the glandular skin covered in fur found in most modern mammals. Modern and extinct synapsids possess a variety of modified skin coverings, including osteoderms, scutes, hair or fur, and scale-like structures. While the skin of reptiles is rather thin, that of mammals has a thick dermal layer. The ancestral skin type of synapsids has been subject to discussion. Among the early synapsids, only 2 species of small varanopods have been found to possess scutes. Fossilized rows of osteoderms indicate horny armor on the neck and back, and skin impressions indicate some possessed rectangular scutes on their undersides and tails. The pelycosaur scutes probably were non-overlapping dermal structures with a horny overlay, like those found in modern crocodiles and turtles. These differed in structure from the scales of lizards and snakes, which are an epidermal feature. It is currently unknown exactly when mammalian characteristics such as body hair and mammary glands first appeared, as the fossils only rarely provide direct evidence for soft tissues. An exceptionally well-preserved skull of Estamenasuchus, a therapsid from the Upper Permian, preserves smooth skin with what appear to be glandular depressions, an animal noted as being semi-aquatic. The oldest known fossil showing unambiguous imprints of hair is the Calovian Castorocauda and Megaconus, 2 non-mammalian mammaliform. More primitive members of the Cynodontia are also hypothesized to have had fur or a fur-like covering based on their inferred warm-blooded metabolism, while more direct evidence of fur in early cynodonts has been proposed in the form of small pits on the snout, possibly associated with whiskers. Such pits are also found in some reptiles that lack whiskers. There is evidence that some other non-mammalian cynodonts more basal than Castorocauda, such as Morganucodon, had hard Aryan glands, which are associated with the grooming and maintenance of fur. The apparent absence of these glands in non-mammaliforms may suggest that fur did not originate until that point in synapsid evolution. It is possible that fur and associated features of true warm-bloodedness did not appear until some synapsids became extremely small and nocturnal, necessitating a higher metabolism. However, recent discoveries on Russian Permian coprolites showcase that at least some synapsids did already have fur in this epoch. These are the oldest hair impressions of hair on synapsids. Metabolism. The first pelycosaurs had the usual reptilian cold-blooded metabolism by all indications, including a sprawling gait and a low-slung body. Historically, it was assumed that the large sails in both Edaphosaurids and some sphenacodontids were utilized for temperature regulation, making them an early example of homeothermy. However, most modern researchers realize that the sails were probably display devices, useless for temperature control. Nonetheless, primitive endothermy might have existed within sphenacodontids. The sphenacodontids gave rise to the therapsids, which may have controlled the body temperatures using metabolic heat far more efficiently. The legs and feet of the early therapsid groups point to a more erect posture, traditionally interpreted as a sign of more efficient metabolism. The presence of large turbinates acting as moisture traps in the nasal passage found in Therocephalon and cynodont therapsids, but not in pelycosaurs, is additional evidence for the shift in metabolism in these groups. In the later cynodonts, the presence of a secondary palate, erect posture and other indicators of high metabolic rate suggests many mammalian features had evolved by this stage. The point in which hair evolved is unclear, but its presence of Permian synapsids further reinforces these early displays of endothermy. Evolutionary history. Archaeotheris and Clepsydrops, the earliest known synapsids, lived in the Pennsylvanian subperiod of the Carboniferous period and belonged to the series of primitive synapsids which are conventionally grouped as pelycosaurs. The pelycosaurs spread and diversified, becoming the largest terrestrial animals in the latest Carboniferous and early Permian periods, ranging up to 6 meters in length. They were sprawling, bulky, and cold-blooded, and had small brains. Some, such as Dimetrodon, had large sails that may have helped raise the body temperature. A few relict groups lasted into the later Permian, but by the middle of the late Permian, all of the pelycosaurs had either died off or evolved into the successors, the therapsids. The therapsids, a more advanced group of synapsids, appeared during the Middle Permian and included the largest terrestrial animals in the Middle and Late Permian. They included herbivores and carnivores, ranging from small animals the size of a rat to large, bulky herbivores a ton or more in weight. After flourishing for many millions of years, these successful animals were all but wiped out by the Permian-Triassic mass extinction about 250 MIA, the largest known extinction in Earth's history, which may have been related to the Siberian Traps volcanic event. Only a few therapsids went on to be successful in the new early Triassic landscape. They include Lystrosaurus and Synognathus, the latter of which appeared later in the early Triassic. Now, however, they were accompanied by the early archosaurs. Some of these, such as Euparkeria, were small and lightly built, while others, such as Erythrosuchus, were as bigger than the largest therapsids. After the Permian extinction, the synapsids did not count more than 3 surviving clades. The first comprised the therocephalans, which only lasted the first 20 million years of the Triassic period. The second were specialized beak herbivores known as dicynodons, which contained some members that reached large size. And finally there were the increasingly mammal-like carnivorous, herbivorous, and insectivorous cynodonts, including the eucynodonts from the Olanchian age, an early representative of which was Synognathus. Unlike the dicynodons, which remained large, the cynodonts became progressively smaller and more mammal-like as the Triassic progressed, though some forms like Trucidocynodon remained large-sized. The first mammalia forms evolved from the cynodonts during the early Norean age of the late Triassic, about 225 MIA. During the evolutionary succession from early therapsid to cynodont to eucynodont to mammal, the main lower jawbone, the dentary, replaced the adjacent bones. Thus, the lower jaw gradually became just one large bone, with several of the smaller jawbones migrating into the inner ear and allowing sophisticated hearing. Whether through climate change, vegetation change, ecological competition, or a combination of factors, most of the remaining large cynodonts and dicynodonts had disappeared by the recent age, even before the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event that killed off most of the large non-dinosaurian archosaurs. The remaining Mesozoic synapsids were small, ranging from the size of a shrew to the badger-like mammal Repenomamus. During the Jurassic and Cretaceous, the remaining non-mammalian cynodonts were small, such as Tritylodon. No cynodont grew larger than a cat. Most Jurassic and Cretaceous cynodonts were herbivorous, though some were carnivorous. The family Tritylodontidae first appeared near the end of the Triassic. They were carnivorous and persisted well into the Middle Jurassic. The other, Tritylodontidae, first appeared at the same time as the Tritylodons, but they were herbivorous. This group became extinct at the end of the early Cretaceous epoch. Dicynodonts are thought to have become extinct near the end of the Triassic period, but there is evidence this group survived. New fossil finds have been found in the Cretaceous rocks of Gondwana. Today, the 5,500 species of living synapsids, known as the mammals, include both aquatic and flying species, and the largest animal ever known to have existed. Humans are synapsids, as well. Unique among the synapsids, however, most mammals are viviparous and give birth to live young rather than laying eggs, with the exception of the monotremes. Triassic and Jurassic ancestors of living mammals, along with their close relatives, had high metabolic rates. This meant consuming food in much greater quantity. To facilitate rapid digestion, these synapsids evolved mastication and specialized teeth that aided chewing. Limbs also evolved to move under the body instead of to the side, allowing them to breathe more efficiently during locomotion. This helped make it possible to support the higher metabolic demands. Relationships. Below is a cladogram of the most commonly accepted phylogeny of synapsids, showing a long stem lineage including Mammalia and successively more basal clades such as Therodontia, Therapsida, and Sphenacodontia. Most uncertainty in the phylogeny of synapsids lies among the earliest members of the group, including forms traditionally placed within Pelycosauria. As one of the earliest phylogenetic analyses, Brinkman and A. both placed the family Varanopodidae with Cassisauria as the most basal offshoot of the synapsid lineage. Reich removed Varanopodidae from Cassisauria, placing it in a more derived position on the stem. While most analyses find Cassisauria to be the most basal synapsid clade, the Benson's analysis placed a clade containing Ophiochodontidae and Varanopodidae as the most basal synapsids, with Cassisauria occupying a more derived position. Benson attributed this revised phylogeny to the inclusion of postcranial characteristics, or features of the skeleton other than the skull, in his analysis. When only cranial or skull features were included, Cassisauria remained the most basal synapsid clade. Below is a cladogram modified from the analysis of Benson.